Mr. Krabs has lied about his entire past. He's scammed children, exploited his employees, and once tried to bury a guy alive just to cover up his crime.
Give me back them toys and freeloaders!
3 light bulbs.
Aha!
But somehow, he still calls himself a proud veteran, a loving father, and even a pillar of the community. It's really a paradox. How can the same man, the one who raised Pearl by himself, owns a famous business, fought in a war, also be the guy who milks jellyfish to death for profit and sells garbage to elders? It doesn't make sense. Or at least, it didn't. Because everything clicked the moment I rewatched one specific episode. The one that finally shatters his whole backstory. The moment we realize Mr. Krabs has been lying about his past from the very beginning. And once you see what this episode reveals, you'll understand exactly how a war hero became Bikini Bottom's biggest scam. Before we crack the truth wide open, we have to talk about the version of Mr. Krabs everyone thought they knew. The version we grew up with. In the very first seasons, Krabs was painted as this hard, tough-love, old-school businessman. Yeah, he was cheap, painfully cheap, but not evil. At the end of the day, you could tell he had a heart, especially when it came to Pearl. We've always seen his soft spot for Pearl, like in the episode Bossy Boots or Squeaky Boots. That's 2 Pearl episodes with boots in the title. Holy Neptune, I guess Pearl really loves her boots. Anyway, it was in Season 3 when we got into the lore about Krabs' past life. In the episode Krusty Krab training video,
After the war, Krabs stayed secluded in a deep depression that seemed endless.
and Squilliam returns.
Mr. Krabs, didn't you once serve on the SS Gourmet?
Aye, aye!
In Krusty Krab training video, they flat out say he fought in a war, came home with nothing but depression, and rebuilt his life from scratch, opening the Krusty Krab. Later in Squilliam Returns, we hear he once served in the SS Gourmet. Another small detail that adds to the image and explains why he has a sharp palate and an even sharper attitude. Then Shell of a Man comes along in Season 4, and it seals the deal for his Navy background. Krabs digs out his old Navy stuff from a chest, and later goes to the reunion with his old pals from the Navy. But his shell comes off at the last minute, SpongeBob puts it on to replace him, you know the rest. There's also another special friend of foe in Season 5 that digs deeper into Eugene's childhood with Plankton. It was said that back then, both of them were practically poor and often got picked on by kids their age. So even he wasn't perfect, far from it, but the story made sense. It somewhat justifies his penny-pinching traits, because he comes from a poor background. It also explains why he runs his business like a boot camp, because that's how it's done in the Navy. And more than anything, it gives Eugene's character lots of depth. The cheap but loving family person we see today is the result of a long, rough, and troublesome journey. And for a long time, we believed him. But ironically, that trust is also what made the paradox hurt even more. How could a guy who seemed so solid end up abusing his employees, torturing jellyfish, and scamming children just for a few extra pennies? At first you think, maybe he just lost his way. Maybe success corrupted him. Maybe it was just his greed slipping out every now and then. We're all human, right? That would have been a reasonable explanation. Until one episode totally blew his cover, because that's not what really happened. The thing is, Krabs has too many inconsistencies in his past. There are lots of small details that just don't add up. I'm convinced there's a part of his history that he never talks about, a part he's always avoided. But instead of clearing it up, he just kept stacking lie after lie to cover it. Okay, so remember how I said Krabs built his whole identity on being a Navy vet? Well, the truth may be more complicated than that. And the episode that proves it is Season 6, Grandpappy the Pirate. The plot starts off small. Krabs is just waiting on a rebate check. But instead of a check, he gets something much more dangerous. A letter in a bottle. It's from his grandfather, Redbeard the Pirate. And it says he's sailing into town that night for a ship inspection. Right away, Krabs panics about the inspection, as many people would. But this is where we get confused. Like, what ship does Eugene have? Turns out he's been lying to his grandfather for years, pretending he still follows in the family tradition of piracy. But here's the actual twist. Eugene was a pirate in the past. He bought a ship, hired a crew, and spent years plundering the high seas. But eventually, the profits just weren't cutting it. Too much risk, not enough gold. So, what did Krabs do? Fired the crew, sold the ship, and gave up the pirate life. And that's the moment everything starts to crumble. Because the last time Grandpa Redbeard spoke with Eugene all those years ago, Eugene didn't tell him he was about to quit. He just smiled and nodded while Redbeard praised him for continuing the family legacy. And now, Redbeard is back. And Krabs knows if the truth gets out, it'll break the old pirate's heart. And so he does what he always does. He fakes it. He turns the Krusty Krab into a pirate ship overnight, pulls SpongeBob, Squidward, and Patrick into the play, and sells the illusion like his life depends on it. What follows is full-blown theater. Fake wind, cardboard waves, a video of a kraken, even Squidward blowing himself up like a balloon pretending to be a sea monster. Everything is staged. And at first, Redbeard buys it. Until Pearl shows up. One look at her, and all the lies start unraveling. The cannon collapses, the sails rip, the sound effects get discovered, and finally, Redbeard calls it out.
I've smelled a lot of stinky things, but nothing smells stinkier than a lie.
But at least this confirms something in the timeline. Since Redbeard didn't know who Pearl was, it's safe to say that Krabs' pirate life and the last time they saw each other are from before Krabs had Pearl, almost 20 years ago. Anyway, Redbeard confronts Krabs with the Pirate Code of Honor: never tell a lie. And Krabs breaks. He admits it all, that he's no longer a pirate. These days, he's just the owner of a burger joint. But the weirdness doesn't stop there. When Redbeard finally learns the truth, he's not mad. He's proud.
Look at your ludicrous prices. Now that's real piracy.
Because at least Krabs didn't give up the family way of life. He just shifted it. He replaced the sword with spatulas, plundered wallets instead of treasure chests, and built a new pirate empire with overpriced combo meals. Now, this immediately raises a lot of questions for us. What about the whole Navy story? The war trauma? Was that just a cover? Which one is the true story? Sadly, things aren't that simple. And there's no one big truth in Eugene's backstory. For years, the story has been simple. Mr. Krabs served in the Navy, fought in a war, came back broke and traumatized, opened the Krusty Krab, and became the penny-pinching boss we know today. But now comes the twist. Grandpappy the Pirate rips all that apart. To understand it better, we have to lay out the timeline for Krabs' life. First and foremost, it's canon that Krabs was born into a pirate family. His grandfather Redbeard practically raised him on a ship, swinging swords and stealing treasure. The episode gives us that flashback. Then I guess from here, the story is connected to the episode Friend of Foe. For whatever reason, Krabs decided to leave the ship, or was taken from a ship. He was still a kid, so he might not have made the decision himself, and attended elementary school with Plankton. Around this time, he was also living with his poor mother, without a father figure. Since his father's presence is nowhere to be seen in Friend of Foe, but more on that later. In Friend of Foe, Krabs actually did discover the secret formula and sold it at school. Kids loved it, and I bet he made quite a fortune on it. But somehow, once Krabs hit early adulthood, he ditched the food game and became a pirate. For real. He bought a ship, hired a crew, spent years plundering the high seas. He admits this. There's no way around it. Then, and here's the key, he gave it up. Why? Well, because it wasn't profitable enough. So he sold the ship, fired the crew, and went back to the food business. Only one problem, his pirate family didn't know. Now, this is where things get messy. Because now we've got two separate backstories competing with each other. One where Krabs is a war veteran and Navy man, and another where he's a lifelong pirate who's been hiding the truth. Now, maybe this is a good time to talk about the fact that some of Krabs' ancestors were true-born pirates. In the episode Senior Discount, after arguing with Old Man Jenkins about ancestry, Krabs summoned his ancestors from the past. But the most interesting one was Krabs' great-great-grandfather, who was summoned with a hook for a hand and a saber in his waist. That's clearly a pirate, alright? So it's safe to assume that Krabs' great-great-great-grandfather influenced his descendants, who is Redbeard, to live a pirate life. Maybe Krabs Sr., Eugene's father, was also a pirate back then, influenced by his father. That would explain why we never saw him around when Krabs was a kid. Heck, we never saw him until season 12. That would also explain why Eugene was so poor as a kid. His father left his family and was just roaming around the seas. And I know this is starting to sound complicated. You might ask, how does this solve the Krabs paradox? Well, we prove it by following the trail of lies. Let's go back to the Krusty Krab training video. The narrator says he fought in a war, but here's the thing. He never says what war, never says what side he was on. And considering pirates often flipped sides depending on who paid more, that's very on brand for Krabs. There's even a chance he fought for both sides, depending on the highest bidder. Or maybe he didn't fight at all, maybe the whole thing's made up. Because remember, the KKTV episode is just a mock training video for new employees. There's no guarantee any of it's real. For all we know, it's just another smokescreen that Krabs invented to bury his pirate past and seem like a respectable businessman. The more you look, the more cracks you find. Because we have to remember, Krabs often lies about the secret formula. In the episode Enemies-in-Law, he said the recipe was an old family recipe. But we know he discovers it right after the arguments with Plankton as a kid. Karen even has all the footage, meaning Plankton also knows about it. Maybe that's why he looked confused when Krabs said it was a family recipe. In another episode, like Plankton's Army, Krabs also bluffed about the recipe itself, putting plankton as the main ingredient. But why all the lies? Well, the recipe bluff could be just one of Krabs' mind games to trick Plankton. He played a lot of those. However, the simpler explanation could just be money. Think about it. You can't run a burger joint as an ex-pirate. That's not good for your business image. You can't sell family values with a rap sheet of sea crimes. And most importantly, he already had Pearl when he opened the Krusty Krab. He needed to look like a role model, a hardworking single father who clawed his way up. I mean, that kind of story sells for customers because it attracts sympathy, and sympathy makes money. And the biggest kicker, even when Grandpa Redbeard finds out the truth, that the pirate ship is fake, the crew is fake, the whole setup is fake, he's not mad. He's proud, because Redbeard sees the truth. Krabs never stopped being a pirate. He just changed his weapons. Back then, he stole treasure. Now, he charges $3.99 for a burger. And that's the paradox solved. Krabs was never a respectable crustacean corrupted by success. He was broken and greedy from day one. It runs in the family blood. All the good parts, the Navy stories, the origin, the family man persona, they're just layers of cover. The only part that ever felt true was his love for Pearl. So, that's the real story. Mr. Krabs didn't fall from grace. There was never any grace to begin with. Everything respectable about him was built on a shell full of lies. Just clever enough to keep the customers coming, and just sweet enough to keep us rooting for him. The real Krabs is a pirate behind that shell. And like a real crab, he's always been able to change into a new one, swapping identities and growing a shell whenever it suits him. Navy vet, community man, loving father. He plays the part as long as the profit's right. In the end, the only thing that might be real about him is his love for Pearl. And honestly, maybe we should have seen this coming. Because SpongeBob has always had this weird talent, sneaking in deep, strange, sometimes brilliant commentary under the guise of kids' comedy. You ever notice how often the show pulls from real-life art, music, and classical film? No joke, SpongeBob is stacked with visual references to actual paintings, cinema history, even Renaissance sculptures. And once you start noticing them, you can't unsee it. If you haven't watched that video yet, now's the time. You'll never look at Bikini Bottom the same way again. See you on the next dive.